box at any time. You can type your questions into the chat box at any time, and Ariana will keep track of them, and we'll pose them to the presenters during the Q&A session at the end. You can please also use the chat box to let us know about any technical problems that we might encounter and not be aware of on our end. Finally, in the chat box, you should find a URL to our link tree, which includes links for our social media channels that I mentioned, the land acknowledgement, and action statement and links. And I think you should also find a link for our code of conduct. These presentations will be recorded and published on our YouTube channel. Let's see. So yeah, our three presenters, I'll introduce them in turn along with their presentation titles. We're starting with Matthew Folse, who's giving a talk on entitled An Examination of the New Orleans Public Library's 10-Year Initiative. Matthew is an adjunct librarian at Delgado, and he also holds a position at the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience here in New Orleans. All right, go ahead, take it away, Matt.
All right, good morning, everyone. Like Will said, I am an adjunct faculty and reference librarian at Delgado Community College, and I do work at the Museum of the Southern Jewish Experience. You can go there via Culture Pass and other means. It's a great little museum, and I will begin sharing my screen now. Share. All right. So here's my presentation, Examination of New Orleans Public Library's 10-Year Initiative. Shout out to Delgado Community College, my employer, and Louisiana State University, where the genesis of this presentation sort of began during my master's there. This is also, shout out to our friends at the Public Library. The work they do is important and transformative, and I don't want this to come across as a critique or reflection inherently on them. This is a literature review on the release of the Public Library's 10-Year Strategic Initiative. So, the New Orleans Public Library has a massive population to examine when it comes to targeting low literacy rates in children and adults. Its population is diverse. More than half of the population of the city is Black, and a large population of the remaining population is non-white. And New Orleans has a historic struggle with low literacy rates in children and adults. We can get an ideal target for this sort of examination of the literature and how we can better the population. So to start with the New Orleans Public Library's 10-Year Strategic Initiative begins with its Smart Kids. SMART stands for science, math, art, reading, and technology. And I want to just kind of hop right into what the literature says, how we can help children. So, developing critical thinking and other information literacy. Quote Ann Epstein, in children ages 3 to 5, children are capable of planning and reflecting key aspects of critical thinking. As planners, children begin with a goal, decide where to work, what materials to use, how to manipulate them, and whether to work alone, with others, and so on. So children are capable from a very young age of very complex, higher-order thinking, and we need to start reflecting that in the way that we present information literacy to children. Additionally, researchers Filipenko and Heidler both reinforce the importance of access to non-fiction literature to young children, but also the scaffolding that educators, in addition to librarians or librarian teachers, can use in children to target their everyday classroom needs while scaffolding targeted literary literacy development in them. Moving on to teens and tweens, the 10-Year Strategic Initiative initially states its coffee shop effect to induce young adult patrons by providing social media engagement and even opportunities for volunteering or even some limited employment. And while there's not a lot of strategic initiatives to increase literacy, we can turn to the literature for that as well. So, young adults often overestimate their information literacy and their ability to interact in digital media environments, and tend to heavily rely on search engines or social media for the gathering and use of information rather than other dedicated sources like librarians or at their libraries. And it's important as we scaffold literacy into teenagers and adulthood to recognize that we now live in a complex, decentralized digital environment that calls on us to adapt and use new tools to reinforce critical thinking and different types of literacy, which is multimodal literacy. So there is no single literacy that is appropriate for all people or for one person over all their lifetime that would not require a constant updating of concepts and competences in accordance with the changing circumstances of the information environment. One look to the literature tells us how gamification of critical thinking and literature skills can attract young adults even into university age and provide engagement with their library and reinforce those literacy skills, digital literacy skills, and help prepare young adults, teenagers entering the world and workforce into interacting with those complex environments. So, specifically talking about New Orleans literacy. Adults in New Orleans are significantly disadvantaged, as up to 27% of New Orleanians are low-skilled or low-literate workers, and the public library claims that about 20% of all adults have no access to the internet or only had access via a smartphone. Similarly, the data center reports that there is a massive education gap in our workforce. There are not enough educated adults to fill the gap in employment in the city. And a majority of the workforce are people of color who often have lower levels of education and literacy than white workers. To better invest in New Orleans workforce and in New Orleanians is to promote these literacy initiatives from the young age through adulthood. Recognizing adult low literacy is part of it is understanding that an adult's literacy is very different than a child's. While many of the technical aspects may appear similar, Sabatini et al. Note that adult learners have certain sensibilities about themselves that children learners do not, and adult instruction should not match child instruction, generally due to self-awareness of the adult and understanding where their literacy skills are at. Sabatini also notes what we call crystallized intelligence, that adult literacy stems from all these tools through childhood and adulthood and builds into crystallized intelligence, which is the idea that this entire lifetime of building skills is what results in a literacy competent adult. And lacking those skills does put people at a unique disadvantage. So while Sabatini outlines major modalities, paradigms, and theories, there are not necessarily a lot of solutions given from his research. Working through the public library, however, adult literacy can be built alongside child's literacy, and building a multi-generational learning environment can be a crucial way for the NOPL to also build its programming. One crucial example I found in the literature inside Massachusetts was opening of a play school, which was an old elementary school repurposed, where parents and children can engage in the supervision of educators, but otherwise engage in unstructured play, which allows both the child and the adult to engage in the play that reinforces the critical thinking and the literacy skills in the child, building those skills both in the child and in the adult, which can often take away a lot of the situational awareness that adults can struggle with in learning early literacy skills. And it's a way to target multi-generational families and units and get them into the library. That's pretty much my entire talk. The models and research are foundational to establishing methods of teaching adult and childhood literacy. There are numerous strategies illuminated for the ability of the NOPL to better uplift its patrons. Many New Orleanians live in poverty, and a majority of them are people of color. Which is why it is crucially important to build these literacy skills in children, to build up the skills in the city, which is majority non-white and is disadvantaged due to the lack of access to more literacy, access to digital literacy that can be attained through the library and many of its programmings, in inclusion with other educators in the city. Thank you. I've also attached my entire bibliography. Hope that was informative. That's the end of my talk. I will hand it back to the executive board and the moderator. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much for that talk, Matt. Remember, feel free to enter questions as we go along, and we'll have Q&A for all the panelists after the last talk. So next, I'm very happy to welcome Caitlin Cooper, another colleague at Delgado. Caitlin is the Collections Development Librarian at Delgado, and her talk today is entitled Liaising with the Library.
Thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Will. And my name is Caitlin Cooper. And one thing that we do here at Delgado is the boss assigns us to be liaisons to a given division, school, department. And I am the library liaison to nursing and allied health. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my experience about being liaison with the nursing department. And I think that liaisonship is valuable because you get to build relationships with faculty outside of the library. And I do think that helps to build interest in and use of the library's resources. So communication is key when it comes to that. And one thing I do is I email the dean every semester, the dean of nursing, and with an email just reminding them that I'm their liaison. And I link to basic faculty services and some nursing relevant resources, i.e. our nursing research guide, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And here's an example of that email. And you can see the links and all of that. And that's the nursing research guide I'll be telling you guys about later. All right. So I think that this helps get them started with seeing what's available to them. And another thing I do in that email is I offer to present a bibliographic instruction module for the nursing faculty. And I always include that as a way to try to get them more interested in that, because as we know, I think instruction for faculty, for those of us that are academic librarians, is very important because, as we know, faculty think they know what the library has and how to use it, but that's not always the case. And if we can get the faculty interested in starting to use the library's resources, then their students will follow. All right, so in that vein, this offer of an instruction session was taken up once. I presented for 10 minutes at the beginning of the nursing division meeting. So in 10 minutes, we have a lot of nursing relevant resources. I couldn't cover a terribly large amount, but I was able to create a handout, which I have happened to use a couple times, sending to individual nursing instructors that have come in asking about resources and things of that nature. And so let's look at that handout. It's kind of like this, and this is kind of revamped from the original one I did because we're trying to start up a recurring session on Zoom about nursing resources open to nursing faculty, students, anybody that might be interested. Pardon me. So I just tell basic stuff about circulation on ILL, the catalog, and then I link to nursing databases and our logging in from home video and a little bit about several of the relevant databases. And Learning Express here, I like to call out because one thing that the students and faculty in the nursing department are always interested in is NCLEX test prep materials. So I collaborated with a colleague, Courtney Storts, to present a session on Zoom last April that followed that handout, and created a promotional flyer for it in Canva. And you can see that here. And I kind of like to call out specific things like finding an article from a nursing journal. And that's one thing that the nursing students will always do toward the end of the semester. That drives a lot of business on our chat reference usually is they will use chat reference to chat in asking about articles from nursing journals and help them with that. And all of that kind of good stuff. And pardon me, there's a Zoom link and there's a QR code with the Zoom link. And I sent that to a couple of nursing instructors, and one serendipitous thing that kicked this off was that Courtney and I had volunteered to do a table at the library, to staff a table at the for the library at the Wellness Expo that we had here at Delgado, and our table was right next to a couple of instructors from the nursing department, and so I kind of talked up the library to them, and I sent them and the dean and all this flyer and the handout and information. And so we tried, but turnout was low, and that will hopefully increase with the session in fall, which we do need to schedule. The nursing students are on a different schedule from most students, so it's a bit of a challenge to figure out what time of the semester will be best to do that for them. Now, another thing that I do here is that we have a nursing research guide, and I update that at least annually, and I pay special attention to the ebooks page. And let's look at that. So I was kind of proud of this for a little bit because this is another way in which it is very important to talk to faculty in whatever division department you're liaising with. And see what their needs are. So I was just talking to a nursing instructor who had come by the circulation desk, and they were interested in the incredibly easy and incredibly visual books and ebooks. And so what I did was I did tab boxes on these that called out some of those so that they could more easily find them. And that's the books page where I did that as well. But of course, with ebooks, you have to go in and make sure to update that fairly regularly. And let's take a look at this nursing research guide. So there is the homepage, which is just basically a blurb with our socials on the side, books with some related call numbers, ebooks. And again, in this case, I do that tab box to call out the incredibly easy and incredibly visual. And then some indexes and databases. We have a lot of nursing databases. And over here, and this is another thing that I do is I have done instructional videos for our YouTube channel that tell people how to use various databases. And I've done a couple on nursing allied health related databases. And here I have embedded one I did on Medline and one I did on Sentinel. And in this case, the databases are tabbed out to nursing, more general medical, and just general. And then journals, print and online. And media. And this is fun because this is another one that we have to update fairly regularly. We don't have a very up-to-date physical media collection, but we do have films on demand, and I like to embed link films on demand videos for my research guides that correspond to whatever topic that I'm doing the guide on. So these are the ones that I chose here, and because these are from Films on Demand or media, I have to make sure those work and are updated at least once a year. And we have a website page of various useful websites. And some nursing organization websites as well. And all of our research guides, we have the writing and citing tab embedded and the Ask a Librarian tab embedded. So that's something that we can always refer them to. And like I say, I try to keep those ebooks and media updated for them. And I was particularly happy when I could do the tab box there. We call out those incredibly easy and incredibly visual. All right. And so that's the research guide. And there are some challenges to this. I mentioned the scheduling difficulties, and that is always a thing. When would be the best time to have a recurring session for them where they would be more likely to attend? And basically getting interest and attendance at sessions. You know, the nursing and instructors and students are definitely busy people. I will say they love our study rooms. Ever since they moved to City Park, we have not had that much study room action since before they moved to City Park. We never had that much study room action like we have now. So they love the study rooms. And one of the benefits, there are benefits to liaisonship. I think it's a good thing to do because keeps the library on the minds of the faculty. And one of the challenges in an academic setting is having to convince the other faculty that we are faculty and that they may not know everything there is to know about the library, and that we can help them with that. So if we can establish a good relationship with them and keep reminding them that we're here, and have all this stuff and that we can help them with it, I think a good thing. And I think it encourages use of library resources by both the faculty and the students in that department. So, thank you for listening, guys. It's kind of my experience, with liaising with the nursing department. I really enjoyed, telling you about it. And in conclusion, just be sure to keep up, communication with them and promote to them, and see what you get out of it. And I think you can be pleasantly surprised. And no, even though we haven't had as much attendance at sessions as I might like, any nursing instructor I've ever talked to or helped with library resources, sending me a link to the research guide or the handout, just so they can go through it on their own or anything like that. They've been most appreciative. And thank you all so much.
Well, thank you very much for that talk, Caitlin. We're going to move on to our final panelist today. I'm very happy to introduce Elizabeth Sterner, health sciences librarian and assistant professor at Northern Illinois University. Elizabeth's talk is entitled Reading and Assessing Systematic Reviews, Developing an Effective Learning Experience for Faculty and Students.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So yes, I'm Elizabeth Sterner. I'm at Northern Illinois University, which is in DeKalb. It's about 70 miles west of Chicagoland. And I want to thank everybody that organized this Information Literacy Forum. So thank you for your efforts. So let me give you, this is what we're going to cover today. I will give you some information about the university and where I'm coming from. And I love that I just followed Caitlin Cooper because I am the health sciences librarian. So I can talk a little bit more about that, and then how I designed the lesson, create the goals, assess it, develop it, and all that, and then my reflection and what my project was. So let me start with that. At Northern Illinois University, we have about 15,000 student enrollment. It's a little lower than it has been. You can read some of these statistics here. Our top undergraduate majors do include health sciences and nursing. So I work with communicative disorders and the rehabilitation counseling, nursing, allied health, public health, and all those liaison areas, as Caitlin mentioned. And I tend to work more with graduate students and faculty than undergraduates. That's just who comes to me more as they need assistance. So this is about the project. So here I have a question for you. And so you can use the QR code there, and you can just use your phone. So do you get any questions about systematic reviews? So right now, if everybody would just take a chance and answer this question, this will help me understand who we are today. And there's 3 questions actually on this survey once you scan it. So a couple of responses are coming in. So for some people, this will not apply at all. If you don't work with evidence synthesis projects or systematic reviews, I hope you can take what I'm working with today and apply it to something you do work with, right? So here are some of our answers. So about a little less than half or so no has now won that you're not getting questions about systematic reviews. For the people who are getting questions, are researchers approaching you? And researchers could be students, they could be, faculty, clinical faculty, full professor faculty, and anything and everything in between. So I do get approached with these questions a lot. And then finally, what's your experience with the systematic review questions? This is all new to me. And so you've been part of it, you've read it, and some of the others. So thank you for sharing. So about the project. So my project was, I had two different groups of people that I needed to talk to about systematic reviews and evidence synthesis. So evidence synthesis takes that literature review, which can, you find what you need to say and you say it in the research, you can always find research for everything, but they look at all the research out there that's available and they try to make an unbiased decision, or not decision, but, pull from the evidence in an unbiased, transparent way, right? So one group of students I've worked with is graduate students, and their questions are always like, oh, I'm going to do a systematic review project in 3 weeks. And if you know anything about systematic reviews, the answer would be probably not, but you want to still work with them so that they do interact with the library and you can maybe guide them towards a systematized review or something. And then also faculty, right? So I had 2 workshops I developed. I needed to provide the definitions and requirements because even people you might think should know, some of the faculty, what these are, and how long they take. It's usually about 18-month project or something, they don't necessarily know this. So I had to provide some of this information to them. I also wanted to inform researchers of other types of reviews because systematic review might be the most common name of some of the evidence synthesis projects, but there's also mapping reviews and scoping reviews. They're just different types of reviews. They're not better or worse. It's answering different types of questions. So helping them choose the proper review. And then also, especially with students who are probably not going to be writing a systematic review, right? Teach them how to read them. That became a learning goal, even though I didn't expect it, was teaching them how to consume it and understand it. And then supporting them if they decide to complete systematic reviews. And on my research guide, right, I have the level of tiers that I can support them with. And it always depends on my time. And I'm on several projects to the point where I have to tell them no, right? So what did I finally develop? For graduate students, it was offered twice a semester. It's a 90-minute workshop. And for the faculty and graduate students within the College of Health and Human Sciences, it was a series of 3 workshops. They have Friday learning every Friday at 2:00. And so I was invited for 3 of these workshops and to present. And I worked with the graduate school to advertise for the graduate students and CHHS to advertise to the CHHS faculty and graduate students workshops. So how, when I'm told, talk about systematic reviews, you have 3 one-hour periods, like to talk with faculty, right? So where to start, right? I wanted to start with, what are my learning goals? What do I want them to be able to accomplish? Examples are identify and outline reporting requirements. Have they ever heard of CRD or something? Identify are resources available. Believe it or not everybody knows, even though, and resources change. We just got a couple new subscriptions, that I wanted to tell, or subscriptions that I wanted to tell them about. Translating a search, if you start like in PubMed with the mesh terms and translating it to CINAHL Complete on the EBSCO platform, or which other, Scopus or whatever databases they're using, and summarize support from a library. So these were just some, and it depended who I was talking to. I use Bloom's taxonomy for ideas of these verbs. And the other thing I should note is I was a high school teacher for 16 years. So I've kind of been designing lessons for, decades now without even realizing it. So some of this has just come natural. And my next question is always know the audience, right? So you want to provide scaffolding as needed. So I asked the group here today, how many of you have any experience with systematic reviews? And it's leaning more towards no than yes, which kind of tells me what I need to say to explain this to you, right? So add scaffolding. And is it more for graduate students than faculty? Not necessarily. It depends on what we're talking about. And know the goals of the audience. A lot of times when I worked with faculty, they wanted to learn more about systematic reviews, but not work on a project of a systematic review. And so just, helping them, or maybe they wanted to better analyze them, go through some of the critiquing of them. Formal versus informal, if we're in person, is that a little different than if we're virtual? If I'm dealing with faculty, I mean, I'm always a little bit formal, right? Because, but you can also be a little fun too. And what do the participants hope to learn? This is another question I always ask myself. What is their goal for showing up? We all know everybody's busy. So if they're taking an extra hour or hour and a half out of their life, what is it they want to know when they leave? And then how do I learn about participants? Back when I was a high school teacher, it was really easy. I had the same students every day in my class for 50 minutes. So, I got to know them. When it's like a one shot in person, you can greet people when they walk in. I'm always the first one there, make sure the door is open, the computers are on, right? And so I can ask them questions about what are their majors and get the students talking. You can start doing some formative assessments. It's kind of what I did earlier with that question. So here's the second question. There's just 2 questions here you can scan. What comes to your mind when you think of a systematic review? This will create the word cloud. And then the second question is, do you want to be part of one of these projects? So go ahead and answer these questions. Again, scan it with your phone. So I'm getting a couple of responses. And if you have no idea what these are, it's completely okay to say nothing comes to mind, or I don't want to know about this, right? Comprehensive, transparent, unbiased. Medical, yeah, these started in the health sciences field, but they've spread to education and psychology and the social sciences. And what's being published is sometimes interesting the more you look at some of these, right? So lots of work, science research, right? Not sure. I love that answer, right? And a lot of you don't have this as part of your job, so that makes sense, right? So 55%, 63% are saying, maybe I'd like to be part of this. I can tell you there is a scoping review I've been working on with one of my teams. We've been working well over a year and we're only in data coding right now. That's how long these projects take. And for those of you that don't know about systematic reviews, you're not just finding like 70 articles to go through. I gave a team, I'm on one team, it's about aphasia, and we had 7,000 articles to go through. And it was quite a large team. You know, they they still like me, right? But it and you maybe will accept, include in the R once you have your inclusion exclusion criteria, maybe like 3% of the articles found, because you're trying to find everything out there, including the gray literature. So here were a bunch of our responses, and we already looked at maybe. So after you do this, how are you going to assess your lesson? So you've decided what your learning goals are. You've decided, what they want to know, who the people are in your audience. How are you going to assess it? What are you going to reflect? How are you going to know if you're successful? Those are the summative evaluations that you use. Formative and summative evaluation, they can be informal, formal, written, verbal. But how do you know that you reached your goals? Did you inform the participants of the agenda and learning goals? So do they know they've reached the goals too? And then finally, this is kind of bugaboo of mine, I guess, is only ask one question per question, right? So, this is like an example. When I work at the research help desk, which I do, I get a lot of questions and I feel I can help patrons. Well, maybe I don't get a lot of questions, but I can really help the patrons. These are two different things you're grading. So that would be a horrible question to try and answer. Or another thing, you want a measurable question. When searching for literature in a database, what color would you use to describe your feelings? Is red good? I'm feeling red. Well, does that mean I'm on fire and I'm finding all the research I need, or does that mean I'm on fire and life is horrible? So that's not a great example. So here's an example of a summative evaluation example I used. And so again, try and answer the question, and I'll try and give you a bit of time and just kind of talk as I do. And I'm kind of answering these questions here with you too. If you wonder, there tend to be many people on a systematic review project or evidence synthesis project. There is not necessarily right or wrong answers here. So I'll give you another moment. So you're just looking at the list of authors and trying to decide if you think they might have content expertise within the field of the topic, and you can look at the title of the paper, nutritional interventions, Crohn's disease, right? And you can look at some of their fields there, Department of Medicine, respiratory medicine, more Department of Medicine. There's a librarian, right? So content expertise, probably. Yes, maybe. Systematic review methods expertise. A lot of faculty are looking more and more to librarians for this expertise. And there is a librarian on this project. And then searching expertise. So because there is a librarian on this project, I do hope there's searching expertise. And the second question, there was a long paragraph about search strategies. Do you think this is a reproducible search strategy? And I don't know if if you're not familiar with this topic, maybe it's overwhelming at the moment. But if you look down at the very last sentence in that giant paragraph I shared, the exact line by line search strategies for all database searches have been included in the supplementary tables. So you should be able to go and pull up those supplementary tables and run that exact search that they ran, and so it should be. So this is an example of a summative evaluation example. This would not be useful right now because I haven't really talked about summative or about systematic reviews with you, but if I had, this would be an example. And then once you decide what you're going to talk about, what you want them to learn, and you know who you're talking to, you know what the goals are and how you assess it, that's when you start developing the activities and the specific talking points and how you're going to fill the half hour, hour and a half, whatever it is you have. So here are some things I try to keep in mind. I've kind of pulled these, I guess, from life experience. So use real life examples. People seem to like that. Use chunking. I know this is a virtual webinar. I hope being able to answer some questions on your phone, is breaking up some of these talking points a little bit. If you were in person, you could do think, pair, share activities. If it was a course where you were in, you could do breakout rooms, right? Use effective data visualization. Now, I know this infographic here has nothing to do with systematic reviews. It's about the diversity in children's books. There's one from 2015 to 2018. This has always stuck with me because it's sharing the data in a way that is so meaningful. So since I've seen it, I thought this is a really good example of data visualization. And then you can look at the previous one versus if I just gave you, the table with the numbers, that's maybe not helpful. Allow participants to base learning on previous knowledge. So I'll give you a really quick example of that in a moment, and use technology as appropriate. So back when I was a high school teacher, we had this new Jeopardy game, back in the day, like 15 years ago. And for like a year, it was like the greatest thing in the world, but then after a while, it kind of became, known as kind of a fad, and students weren't having it anymore. So use technology when appropriate, when it adds something, but don't just keep using it because we have technology, I guess. That's my point. So here's an example of visualization that I do from the workshop. So evidence synthesis looks to finding all the information out there on a topic. There's different types of projects, meta-analyses is adding the statistical analysis when possible to the systematic reviews. And you can notice with literature and narrative reviews, I added that a little bit under the umbrella because they do look for, try and look for all the information and maybe try not to be biased, right? But it's mostly not under the umbrella. So that's an example I've used. Here's an example for using previous knowledge. So what's a healthy diet for children? This is pretty generic research question, but I get students coming to me for assistance, and they don't know where to start. They think, oh, I just type this into Google Scholar and I'll get my question, so we can start brainstorming what are the key concepts. I won't go through this with everybody now because either this doesn't apply to your job or you already know what I'm doing. But you can look for the synonyms for diet and for children. With children, if I'm with students, I like to start with the word kid. So someone will give me the word goat or something. So that's great too. But you can also start talking about, well, what field are you working in? If it's anything with medicine, maybe you're thinking pediatric, anything with education, maybe you're thinking student, anything with criminal justice, maybe you're thinking juvenile. So to try and get them to start brainstorming ideas. And this is previous knowledge they're using. You connect the synonyms within the subject with or, the broad subjects with and now you've got a search topic. If I'm working with advanced students, it's a more advanced question typically, but that's when we get into using quotes or the medical subject heading the mesh terms in PubMed or, the nearby, the different search styles. So this is just very basic to show an example of previous knowledge in building and scaffolding. So here's a question I have for you. What type of classroom activities do you prefer? I'm just curious, really, on this one. So think pair share, open-ended survey questions, or game show quiz. I know there is a game show quiz out there. And to me, it seems like it's geared towards a younger audience and people use it a lot. I guess maybe I'm not good at marketing it or selling it or being able to pull it off, right? So for me, I like the open-ended survey questions, think pair share. So we've got a couple of responses here, a game show quiz, right? I hope these Microsoft forms that I've embedded into this presentation have been helpful too, right? Okay. And finally, this is what I ended up with after I designed this lesson. This is the lesson for graduate students. Now it's an hour and a half. So it was about an hour 10, hour 15 of activities and talking. And there were a lot of activities built in. And then about 15 minutes for questions. So we started with 2 polls and a chat question. We offered them virtual and in person, but virtual had better attendance. So, trying to get and understand where people are at and giving them a anonymous platform and sometimes not just the chat box to share this, right? So, we talked about what's a systematic review and what are all the pieces of it. And then we had an activity and we gave them an actual article and they went through it. And then we talked about the stages of a systematic review, and the team composition. And these will have you know, they need at least 3 people, but they'll have 6, 8 people, whatever. And they'll take a year and a half in general if they're done well, and what else you have to do. And then we evaluated a methods section, and then there was an activity. We talked about other types of evidence synthesis projects because not every student needs to write a systematic review because they're only one person. And yeah, anyway, I won't get into that. That's a tangent. And finally, final thoughts and other poll and chat questions. So that's what I ended up with. And then finally, once you build this, you have to reflect on how it went. So with the graduate students, there was active engagement. It worked really well. And there was evidence of critical analysis. So those were the good points. They were learning what we wanted them to learn. Some of this coworker and I say we, a colleague and I sometimes would present some of this together. And then, but things that could be improved were, it was a low attendance. I think a lot of us in libraries know this feeling. We have these great presentations and few people show up. I think it was too early in the semester. I think people might be a little bit tired of virtual, but yet I think it's the way to reach the most people. So I don't know the answer there. And then finally, we had a transition in the marketing team at the graduate school. And so I think we just kind of hit this awkward transition time where it didn't get marketed as much. So we do keep running these periodically, but overall, the people who attended were very, very happy. So I have one more open-ended question for you. Some of you like open-ended question. What tips can you add for designing an effective learning experience? Does anybody have anything to add? Feel free to add any tips you might have. So we've got fun or interesting. Anything else? Give it another moment or two. Student driven, yes. Patience. I love that. Interacting with students. I found I can speak of having been a high school teacher for 16 years. The students knew if you cared about them, and that really mattered, that their success was important to you. And so interacting with them, caring, showing patience, that all really helped. I don't know if any more answers are coming in. I'll give it one more moment. Let's see. Probably hands on, right? So thank you. All right, we'll move on to the final slide, which is a thank you. I hope this has been interesting and helpful. And even if you don't work with systematic reviews or evidence synthesis projects, or, the graduate students like I do, maybe you can take some of my steps that I've used, that I've kind of developed in my lifetime here, for building your own projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that talk, Elizabeth. We have plenty of time for questions. I don't think we have a message. Oh, more thanks to Elizabeth. I don't see any in the Q&A, but I think Ariana is going to monitor the Q&A and the chat and raise any questions that appear there. And I think for panelists, if you have questions, you can turn your camera on and address each other here.
Not a question, but a comment from Caitlin Ford. Really interesting to hear from the perspective of someone working with instruction topics beyond the typical undergraduate freshman research project. And I completely agree.
Thank you. I'll add for me, because I do work so heavily with graduate students and faculty, it's interesting to hear undergraduate projects, you know, the balance and how I can apply that to what I do. But it also helps to know that you know, I know where students are coming from. I knew them in the high school level, you know, and I've kind of missed some of the early years. So it's really good for me to see those activities from everyone else too.
I can start things off with a question for Elizabeth, and just thank you for that really data-driven and fascinating talk. And I loved the interactive component of it. You really brought a, I think, welcome interactive dynamic to this format. Yeah, so, I'm just trying to I'm wondering, this is a really impressive pedagogical and outreach program you built, it seems. And I'm just wondering about like how you balance that with your other job responsibilities, if you're part of a team, or I wasn't sure if you're head of health sciences librarian.
I'm the only
division.
health sciences librarian, but I do work closely with the education librarian who does work more and more on systematic review and evidence synthesis projects. So we have our own people, so to say. You know, she's responsible for graduate level education students, but it's really helpful to have somebody to balance that knowledge base with. Plus, I'm in Illinois, so Health Science Librarians of Illinois is very active. I have my network that way. But how do I balance it with working the research desk, helping, you know, the students, you know, everything else, collection development, everything else I do? I think the short word or the short answer would be no. No, I can't do this for you. And drawing the line, and I do have a research guide for evidence synthesis and systematic reviews. And if I agree to be on their research team, I will, you know, run the searches, attend team meetings, you know, share with development of scope, manage the searches, help with inclusion, exclusion criteria development. I've told them, no, I don't screen, you know, you're the content experts. And then I'm a co-author, right? As, but I only limit that. I can only handle in various phases about 4 projects at the most. And I tell the others, I can help you get started. I don't tell them, but I tend to offer about 3 1-hour sessions to get them, you know, started. I don't really cut anybody off, but you know, I'm not going to be sucked into doing their entire projects for them. So I think really the word no is the answer. Sorry, that was kind of long and rambling.
That was really helpful. I have a follow-up question, but I think I should hold it, and we can start opening up the conversation. So I think Ariana will share the questions in the chat.
Yeah. From Caitlin Cooper, she's asked, what program did you use for the polls?
That's Microsoft Forms. So it can be embedded into the Microsoft or the, you know, the Office PowerPoint, or it's Office Forms, Microsoft Forms. So that's embedded that way. And I think I realized one form said select all, but you can only select one. Sorry about that.
Thank you. We have another question from David Dugar, not sure. He's curious as to which databases you have available to use for systematic reviews, since no institution can have everything.
Yeah, of course, we'd like more. We don't have Embase, right? We are not a tier 1 institution. We're tier 2, you know, a research institution. So we got rid of Web of Science before I started at Northern, and we got Scopus. I've been a librarian about 9 years now, and I just moved to this position about 2 years ago. So we have Scopus, we have, you know, the PubMed stuff, of course, CINAHL Complete always, and depending on the topic, you know, the ProQuest Nursing and Allied Health Source or communication and mass media, if it's something with aphasia. So yeah, so basically, your typical standard, and then Scopus, PubMed, CINAHL are like the three always. And then what else? Yeah, but we don't have everything, and nobody does, unfortunately, right?
Right, thank you. I don't see any more questions from chat right now, but Will, you can go ahead and ask yours. Oh, we have some participants who have raised their hands. Let me let them unmute.
That's me, I think.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Making things unnecessarily complicated.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to open things up and ask Caitlin a question. I'm just yeah, I'm wondering also about your multiple roles at Delgado and whether the work you're doing as health sciences liaison or nursing school liaison, like, does that inform your work as collections development librarian? Like, do you get requests like, oh, we really need this database to teach this subject, or like criticism, like you guys are paying for this resource that we don't use, or other feedback loops that or synergy in your multiple roles?
That is an excellent question, Will, and I will say that I have an actual materials request form that goes to my email at faculty. In fact, I embedded it as a link in the email that I send out. And I will say, the nursing department is the one that sends me the most requests. And they are a department where we do have to keep materials up to date. And so I actually had ordered a bunch for them after the move from charity. But anyway, as far as the databases, the challenge here is to get them to understand how much we already have. Since we are an undergraduate institution, it's not the same as being heavily into research. And but they still are very interested in CINAHL. The nursing instructors, that's what they know, CINAHL, and they're really into that one. And a challenge with trying to tell them about what we have is that there's more than just CINAHL, and there are nursing you can get nursing journal articles from any number of other databases as well. But it's not so much as they say, oh, we don't like this, is that they don't know what we have, which is the challenge there as far as the databases go. As far as books, a lot of times the students come in looking for their textbook, and they have to we have to send them to the bookstore, or oh gosh, the e-textbook program that they get in their Canvas, but or they're looking for the NCLEX prep materials. And that's why I like to, that's really important, and that's why I call out in the handout Learning Express, because that does have some NCLEX prep materials that are current, and which is a good thing. And other than that, I do as a collection development librarian, I do the program impact studies, and including the nursing, and I keep that updated once a year as far as what we have that pertains to them. Okay, that answers the question.
Up next, we have a question from Janine for Matt. Your topic of using NOPL strategic plan was so interesting. What attracted you to the topic in the first place?
Yeah, thanks for the question. This, I think I mentioned it very briefly at the beginning. This all sort of started as an idea. Um, I, I needed to write a paper during grad school, and this is sort of where the idea started. I guess I always had an interest in early childhood literacy. I help uh, I help take care of my young nieces a lot, so I guess I'm always kind of just that was just sort of a pet interest of mine I developed during grad school was early childhood literacy. And when I guess I was looking around at representative institutions local to the area, and I realized, well, the greater general New Orleans area has skews a little differently in population than the specifically Orleans Parish. So I wanted to kind of focus on Orleans Parish because it has a well-documented population and literacy rates, poverty rates, etc. So I thought that made it a really clear population and a really clear institution to focus on that published this really specific plan, and that made it a really good sort of like uh, jumping off point to go into the literature and see sort of here's the stated problems that we can examine the city and the population and what the 10-year strategic initiative stated, and then we can kind of just pop into the literature and look and see what ideas are being reinforced in terms of problems stated, and then if there's hypothetical solutions or people have published certain solutions. Everything's not one size fit all, but it's more sort of just I guess also a way for us to look back as people who work in databases and stuff a lot and look at problems and realize we can still go back to those places to find answers as professionals in libraries too. So it's sort of both of those kind of things.
Yeah, Matt, I had a question as well. It kind of harkens back to our discussion on Monday, but uh, yeah, like we do a lot, like this is coming out of grad school where we do a lot of research. It's very academic. We probably do, I don't know what, like a dozen literature reviews by the time you're done. And then, yeah, and then coming to Delgado and working behind the circulation desk, like it's a lot of soft skills. And we don't get any of that in online MLIS school, right? So I'm wondering, uh, yeah, like that topic particularly that you talked about today, like obviously that those issues, though we're dealing with those every day at Delgado, and um, yeah, it might not be much of a question, but like, yeah, do you find like all that all those literature reviews and particularly that topic you spoke about in particular today, does that bear heavily on your work as a librarian or in your other roles?
I think it helped me cultivate a lot of kind of professional interests, which I think does translate into workplace skill, because you do get random, requests, and they can be complex faculty reference requests, and they can be, I think you were there. Someone came up. I'm a history major. Someone came up and asked me about the Alamo the other day, and I gave them a baseline answer, and that seemed sufficient enough. And so sometimes, yeah, we do these really like technical work, but I think that does give us um, maybe this is kind of a like musician metaphor, but you get licks, right? You get licks, and then as you perform the sort of improvisational work, you grab a lick and you grab a lick, and that sort of builds the kind of the way that you interact with people, and the technical knowledge that you develop can in turn kind of translate to soft skill. When people kind of come to you and you have that, not necessarily like all the answers at your fingertips, but it gives you a really good uh, hook line to kind of get started working with people. I don't know if that totally answered your question or if that made sense at all or it was overly rambly, but yeah.
It was a great answer to a rambly question, I would say. Thank you. We do have a couple comments. I don't know if you want to read them, Mariana.
Sure. Caitlin says, I think most of us learn just as much in our first year as librarians as we did in grad school. And I just said that I agreed with it.
Yeah, I would say at least as much.
For sure, definitely.
We do have plenty of time if we want to use it. I don't see any questions in the chat and Q&A, but I would just invite our panelists again if you had any questions for each other, or if there were points of that might lead to some takeaways or insights as a group.
I guess I had a question for Elizabeth. I don't know if you mentioned it. How does you think engaging in systematic reviews and this, and then a lot of this outreach work builds up a lot of like goodwill in the library and through you as like the liaison to that department? And then I guess follow up with Caitlin is, do you see uh, a lot of layover, or I guess that's not the right word, but like a lot of like Elizabeth doing can maybe, yeah, I guess, inform communication with the nursing department or vice versa, I suppose too. Just sort of curious. You both have that kind of unique connection, so.
I think the first part was for me. And you asked, does this build any goodwill? Yes, this builds a huge amount of goodwill. It's kind of, to some of the faculty on campus in my areas, kind of a trendy topic right now. So they're coming to me more, but it's also now that they're coming to me more with other questions. I've had a situation lately where a faculty member and a student published in a predatory journal. And then when they wanted to withdraw their publication, there were threats that it would be published as a retraction. And I told them you need to go see legal counsel and stuff. But yes, this work, which was kind of shiny and interesting to them at first, has built goodwill and spread it into other ways of, which books do you need? Which databases do we need? And I've been able to argue and get support, for like Mometrics is one of our newer additions, education was arguing for that too. So, but it has helped to build these connections.
Caitlin, would you like to speak to that as well?
Certainly will. Yes, I mean, I do believe that, the more goodwill that you can build with other faculty, the better. And, if you're friendly and offering them resources, that's a good thing. Like when I was talking about, my volunteering at the Health Expo, and happened to notice nursing faculty at the table next to me, I had to engage them. And I did, and I think that, they were very receptive and very nice, and I do think it builds goodwill. The more that, you can do that, the better.
And if I can add to that, I think the more goodwill you have with the faculty, the more it is them to encourage students to use the library resources to make use not only of our, physical, digital, electronic resources, but also as us as humans, and then that connects them to the writing center, and so it's very good.
Oh, absolutely. That is definitely one of the important reasons that I am an advocate for bibliographic instruction for faculty. And even, you have to deal with the fact that they kind of don't think they need it, but they kind of do. But if you can kind of at least talk to them and give them a handout, a link to a research guide. I'm not talking just about nursing faculty here because I've done that with other faculty. I added a bunch of e-media for the theater instructor not long ago, for talking to him on the research guide for theater work. But regardless, but that's a big reason because they will bring their students who are using those.
Awesome. Thank you.
We have another question in the Q&A or the chat, I think. Anyway,
Yes, from Therese. For Elizabeth, do you partner with professors to teach lessons in their classes also?
Yes, I do. Um I present at the PhD new student orientations when they have their weekend long orientations. I present, sometimes it's a one shot and that's all I get with the students. Specifically, there's like a health science 350 undergrad class. With the graduate level courses, I'm invited in more frequently. It depends really on the topic of the course. I do not teach my own class. That has been brought up by the dean, but she and I would co-teach a in-depth research class, but I think that would be years in the making. So we can always dream, right? But yes, I do present to classes.
I guess I kind of assumed wrongly that you were mostly talking about professional graduate degree programs, but now I'm learning that you have PhD programs as well, and your work sounds all the more ambitious and commendable. Yeah,
One of the greatest comments I got from one of the professors I work with, she's a nutrition, and she said, "Oh, now I tell my students they are not doing systematic reviews because it's been, even at my last institution, trying to tell the professors this is not a systematic review project you're assigning to students. Label it correctly, or systematize review or something." But some of that feedback. And so I have gone in and talked to two students about what a real systematic review is. And then they do kind of an abbreviated example, as a singular assignment. So that's been positive feedback. But yes, I love my job and I'm very grateful to have the support of administration in the library that gives me the power to take adventures with the work I do and to try new things and to grow into the position, as well as to, draw the boundaries and say no, that I'm only one person and I can't do everything. So
I'd like to invite any more questions or comments. Well, I'll start making a few. Did you have something, Ariana?
No.
I'll make a few closing comments, and if anyone thinks of something, please go ahead and type it in or raise your hand. I really enjoyed hosting today and hearing, two very closely related conversations, and one that seems to be on a different topic. But to me, what was really interesting was the themes that united them, which of course is information literacy and just the notion that, the breadth of the coverage that we had. We talked about information literacy from school children in New Orleans all the way to, as we get from Elizabeth's latest comment, we still have information literacy work to do with professors at research universities. It looks different in different situations and in different patrons and communities. We've had three really stimulating and thoughtful cases to chew on. Let's see. Are we going to drop a social media link again as we close, Ariana?
Sure, I can. Give us a follow on Facebook, our business page, and Instagram. The links to those I will be posting in the chat right now. For all of our panelists today, thank you so much. If you would like to share your presentations with the attendees for the forum, please feel free to email me. You probably have my email because I've probably bothered you before. So go ahead and email those to me, and I will make those presentations available each day under the YouTube video. So you can go straight to the YouTube video and click on those links, and we will probably send out all the links in one big comprehensive email after the forum is over. Thank you all so much.
Real quick, so I'm not seeing a link. I don't know if it's me.
Oh, I did it to Janine. I'm sorry.
That's okay. And we also have a form. If you could please take a few minutes to fill out our survey, that will help us, especially as we plan next year's forum. And check YouTube. You can find our channel on YouTube with a search, and all these videos and prior year fora will be on there, are already there. You can email us at nolailc@gmail.com with any questions or comments. And that's all I've got. Thank you again to our presenters and to all of our everyone in attendance and our very stimulating conversation. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.